okay, if this thing were to happen, what would you do to move forward? And they're like, first, wow, life would actually move on. I would maybe, at worst, cry. I would feel uncomfortable. I'd feel upset. Hey dancers, it's Kirsten. Welcome back to the Confident Dancer YouTube channel or podcast if you're listening there. I'm very excited for today's episode because I'm going to be sharing tips for those of you who are preparing for ballet competitions. I'm talking YAGP, Prix de Lausanne, UBC, IBC, I don't know. Tell me what competitions you do. And also, if you're watching and you don't do ballet, you do competitions in another genre, let me know. What's the big competition for you that you're preparing for? I'd love to know in the comments. I know from working with lots of YAGP finalists and competitors at semifinals that competing, and I also know from personal experience, it is quite the mental game, is it not? So today I'm going to share with you some actionable, very helpful tips that I've shared, some of these, with clients I've worked with to help them have a really empowering and positive time, enjoy themselves, work through stress, overcome extreme nerves or performance anxiety, and help them to perform confidently on stage and deliver a performance they're very proud of. So buckle up. I'm just going to share some very helpful mental tools to help you prepare for a great time, and I'd love to know what you think in the comments. Or if you're listening over podcast, feel free to send me a DM on Instagram, Kirsten_the Confident Dancer. You can find me there. I'd love to hear your feedback. Tip number 1 is to focus diligently on what is within your control and to acknowledge and let go of what is not within your control. I literally have clients make a list. List out the things that you can influence. And by the way, I like the word influence over control, because control, it tends to promote a lot of black and white thinking. Like either you are completely in control or out of control, and life often isn't that black and white. So I find it to be often more helpful to use the word influence. So what can you influence? What is not so influenceable by you? When you actually list that out on a piece of paper or in the notes app of your phone, you can have a clear visual of where you can be putting your energy and make more empowering choices there. And you can also acknowledge where you are setting up a lot of energy leaks for yourself. And what I mean by that is wasted emotional and mental space being poured into trying to change things or worrying about things that you can't change. So some examples of this in a competition setting are what you can influence. Of course, you can influence how you perform on that stage. You can influence your own mentality. Are you going into it confident, or are you going into it feeling like you don't belong there, insecure? You can work on your own mentality. You can be really specific about what you're there to gain, and that's going to tie into another tip later. You can be very purposeful with your time. Use other competitors as inspiration instead of looking at them as, you know, their success is your loss, whatever it is. There are so many things that you can influence. And when you look at the things that are not under your influence or control, those things are going to include, to a certain extent, this is one of those gray areas, the scores. You can, of course, influence the score by giving your personal best performance and preparing to your fullest ability. Of course you can. However, we all know that if you really think about it, scores are subjective. We know that. We are doing an art on that stage. Art by nature is subjective. It is not quantifiable. It's part of what we like about the arts. It gets us in our feelings and less in our heads, right? So the trouble is that this art form, ballet or whatever genre you do, is being fit into this metric, this system of a competition where we're kind of pretending that we can measure better or worse objectively. Now, of course, there are some rubrics that can be used to say, okay, she did more turns than the other girl. Okay, she got her leg higher than this dancer over there. Sure, but there is still an element to the score that is going to be very based off of feeling, perhaps even, not to open up a can of worms, corruption. Okay, they do exist at ballet competitions. Sorry to burst your bubble, but I've heard some things. All right, so you never know what exactly influenced that person's score that they're giving you. And also, I know YAGP judges, and they've told me, even though they're trying to do the best job that they can, they are working with such a small amount of time. They are tired. They are in the dark. They are trying to watch your variation and scribble down notes, trying to be helpful and giving you a score. It is a very hard job. So when I say you can't entirely influence the score, that's supposed to free you from putting so much weight and meaning into that. So that's, again, going to tie into another point later, but list out what can you influence, what can you not influence or control, and be very diligent about deciding where you want to be putting your focus, attention, and energy. Tip number 2 is to create a definition of success that is within your control or influence to fulfill, and one that is specific. Guys, this is really important. So many dancers, understandably, will say one of two things. 1, I want to place. Okay, cool. Doesn't everybody? How confident do you feel that you are going to place? Again, it partially gets you focused on things that are outside of your control, and it gets you so focused on external factors like who's going to show up. That's another thing you can't control. You can't determine or control who else shows up to that competition, which then of course is going to affect the ranks of who places in what position. You're not in control of that, so you might as well let it go and focus on this tip number 2, creating, like I said, a specific and meaningful definition of success for this competition that is within your control. Here's an example of this. Instead of just saying, oh, by the way, here's the other thing I hear a lot. Okay, if you don't want to place, what do you want? I want to do my best. Okay, if you have been a long time watcher or listener of this podcast or channel, you know that makes me go crazy, because what does that even mean, you guys? Doing your best is not specific, and it's often not even meaningful in the way that we're imagining that in our minds. Okay, so what you can do is say, okay, great, I'm glad you want to do your best self. Great. What does that look like? What are the qualities I'm going to be sharing on that stage? What are the moments and the skills I want to demonstrate on that stage, or the feeling I want to share, the persona I want to give off, the attitude I want to have backstage and on stage that will make me feel like, yes, I did my best. Because when it's specific, when it's meaningful, and it's in your control, not only will you be able to stay focused on creating that thing, you also have more confidence in your ability to create that outcome, because it's specific, it's meaningful to you, and you will know it's specific when you know, third thing, what actions you can take to help yourself fulfill that meaningful, specific, within your control definition of success. Sure, a lot of people want to win, but what would be the kind of performance you can reasonably give and you want to give to help you have your best possible chance at placing? That's going to be a way to switch that goal from I want to place, which is going to get you a little fearful, a little insecure, because you know deep down that depends on who thinks what about you and who shows up. You're not in control of those things. So that's a way to reframe this goal to place in a way that it puts it back in your hands. You can do something about that. That's confidence building, that's certain, that's empowering, it's actionable. So do that. Number 3, this point is about perspective. Decide how you want to feel during this competition day or weekend and on stage. Decide how you want to feel going into this competition, and choose a perspective that helps you to feel that way. This is such a simple way that honestly anyone can use this to utilize the power of your mind simply and effectively. So often we just notice how we feel and we don't even know in that moment that it's a perspective about the situation that's creating the feeling. And if we were to just stop to ask, okay, whoa, what perspective about this situation is creating this fear, this stress, this insecurity, this anxiety? Then you'd be able to challenge the perspective. When we just get stuck in our feelings without questioning the perspective, well, we get stuck, like I said. So this tip is a way to reverse engineer that. So what you could do is when you decide, here's how I want to feel during this competition weekend. Maybe you want to say excited. Okay, what perspective about this competition would help you to go into it feeling really excited? Is it that, it's truly only up from here? Even if you bomb, like nothing bad really in a meaningful, lasting way is going to happen to you. It's really only up. You could get scholarships, you can make friends, you can meet people, make connections that I can guarantee if you stay connected in the ballet world, you will see these people when you're my age. I'm 30, You're at least going to be Facebook friends with them or Instagram, whatever. So you can make connections. When you just craft a perspective or several perspectives that elicit that feeling for you, you can tap into the feeling. If it's confidence, you can ask yourself, what perspective would help me to feel more confident going into this? An example of this could be that art is subjective. Some people are going to be able to do cleaner technique, more tricks, perhaps. Sure, that could happen. But you have something unique to offer. You have yourself, your own artistry, your own quality that there is no competitor for. Maybe that's a perspective. So yeah, I just made that example up on the fly, but when you get creative and flexible with the perspectives you choose, you can really tap into just about any feeling you want to. So use that to your advantage. Tip number 4 is one that I love. This is a huge component of my coaching philosophy as a high performance mindset coach for dancers. Instead of trying to slap band-aids of positive thinking onto your fears, look them straight in the face and say, what am I so afraid of? What do I think will happen? Look at it in the face. When you do that, it has less power over you. And so the point here specifically is to look at exactly what are you afraid will happen. Like, think in terms of outcomes, not just generally like, oh, performing is scary. No, when we're afraid of things, we're often afraid, like when it gets down to it, we're afraid of an outcome. Are you afraid of making a mistake? Okay, well, it's really helpful to be specific about that. And it's not that the whole competition is so scary. Maybe it's that you feel the expectation is really high on you and you're worried about letting down your teacher or your parents or yourself. Okay, when you look at the fear and you get specific about what it actually is, it's going to be more manageable. You can do something about this specific fear. When fear stays very general, it's hard to do anything about it, and we end up just resorting to things like breathing exercises, telling ourselves it's okay, and it's like, sure, there's some value to that, but there's a reason why I do the work that I do and I have a business that is successful. It's because it doesn't often work for a lot of dancers where we feel like we're just trying to convince ourselves of something that we don't feel is true. So this point of looking at exactly what you're afraid of and then doing these next steps is so helpful. First, instead, let's actually, for a moment, before we go deeper into what to do about the fear, let's look at what do you want, okay? So we can focus a lot on, okay, what are you afraid of? And then go straight into action, like what can you do to help yourself avoid it? And what can you do to help yourself move forward if it were to happen? We're going to talk about those in a second. But what I actually recommend is looking at, okay, I know that's what you don't want. That's the outcome you want to avoid. But what do you want? And get specific about that. Like I said earlier, how do you want to feel? How do you want to do that pirouette sequence you're afraid of? Imagine yourself doing it that way. Then you can bring in a visualization routine around that. We'll talk about that in a bit. Focusing more on what you do want and giving that more airtime in your mind is really helpful from a psychological standpoint, because what we repeat in our minds, we are mentally rehearsing. We are getting our brains more and more familiar with that pattern of thought, with that visual that's attached to it, with the feeling, and then soon enough we start to associate fear and anxiety with competing or even performing in some cases. So what you can do is just say, whoa, okay, yes, what's the specific fear, but also what do I want? And then action. What actions can I take? What simple steps can I take to help give myself my best possible chance at what I do want? Balance it out when you're also looking at the fear. The next things, like I already mentioned, are to, when looking at the fear, say, okay, what specific actions can I take to help myself avoid this fear from coming true? If it's disappointing a teacher, okay, well, maybe it's all in your head and you could just have a conversation with them if you have that kind of relationship with them hey, I'm honestly just afraid of disappointing you, and I'm trying so hard, and I really want to do such a good job, and I just want you to know I'm putting the work in, and I kind of wanted to express that to you because maybe it's not even on your mind, but I just wanted to put it out there. If you have that kind of personal relationship with your teachers, sometimes that is the case because when you're rehearsing for these competitions, there are lots of individual coaching sessions that you have with them. So maybe it's that. If the fear is making a specific mistake, all right, you're worried that you're going to fall out of your turns. That's totally normal. Don't we all have nightmares about that for performances and competitions? I know I have. So what you could do is say, all right, what specific actions can I take and focus on that will help me to avoid this fear from coming true? A lot of times it's like ground yourself in your plie, feel the rhythm of your plie, relax your neck, clarify your spot, like whatever physical cues technical cues help you to consistently produce the kinds of turns that you want. Focus on doing that. Keep it really simple. When we get scared and anxious and nervous, our mind loves to get chaotic and complicate things. So when you already have that plan with yourself, like, nope, I'm gonna just feel my feet flat on the floor in my point shoes in a plie. Okay, I'm gonna focus on that feeling, or focus on the rhythm of the music and keeping my knees loose in plie so I can stay very musical in my movements. Maybe that's something that you can focus on. That's also great to clarify with yourself in rehearsals so you can continue to practice that focus on those actions as you rehearse, and it's going to make it a lot easier to reproduce on stage. The third thing is, if the fear does come true, how will you move forward? I find that this is one of the most reassuring tips that at least I've gotten feedback and seen with so many clients that I've coached, that they feel very relieved a lot of times when I ask them this question. Okay, if this thing were to happen, what would you do to move forward? And they're like, first, wow, life would actually move on. I would maybe at worst cry. I would feel uncomfortable. I'd feel upset. Okay, maybe in the case of this competition I wouldn't place. Okay, yeah, that would really bum me out. But like, maybe even worst case scenario, like I'm really thinking of things that people really do deeply fear, because I want to acknowledge these things they are realities for some dancers. I hope it's rare, but I know it does exist. Getting yelled at by your teacher or whatever. Okay, even if that were to happen, what would you do to move forward from that? Imagine it. What it does is it signals to your brain, you're not going to die. That's always the core human fear. This is going to be the end. This is it. And by just imagining what you would do after that fear comes true, if it were to, there's something so reassuring about that. Like, I would be okay in the end. Uncomfortable for a bit. I'd feel some things, but I'd be okay. All right, cool. So hopefully this helps you too. The fifth tip is visualization. I already mentioned this one, and I will do a separate video coming out soon on how to specifically use visualization techniques effectively to help you consistently perform your personal best. But I'm sure you can also Google this or just simply use it intuitively. Visualize yourself dancing and feeling the way that you want. Developing a really clear mental picture or mental movie of you being on stage, especially in a moment that otherwise you would consider to be stressful, like open stage time, rehearsal time, or walking up to the check-in table the first day and you feel a lot of nervousness or fear or anxiety even thinking about that moment because you're worried that you'll be intimidated. Okay, specifically visualize those moments you're afraid of and visualize you feeling good, things going better than you thought. And of course you could do this, I recommend you do it for your solo or whatever routine you're doing. Visualize yourself dancing exactly the way you want to, feeling the way you want to. Again, I'll do a more in-depth video about how to use visualization techniques, but a lot of this is intuitive for many dancers, so I will leave that there so I have something to talk about in the other video. Yes, visualization is really powerful. Number 6, I already mentioned this one, but I want to go deeper in on it. Just remember that scores are very subjective, and I encourage you to get out of this mathematical mindset that really trips a lot of dancers up. They imagine, and they get really in their heads because of this, they imagine, and comment if you've done this too, that any little step that doesn't go perfectly they're already in their head, like, that's a point off, that's a point off, oh, I'm not going to make top 12, top 24, I'm not going to do this, that, the other, oh, they saw that. And it's so distracting to think that way. So I call that mathematical thinking. It's kind of just a funny label I've come up with, where in your mind you're like, oh, I did this well, point up. Okay, I didn't do that well, point down. And even though there could be some reality to that, it is not a helpful mentality or mindset to be in, because it gets you really in your head, and it also causes a lot of unpleasant emotions to come up if you feel like you did something bad or wrong. This is where a lot of dancers get thrown off, they shut down, they just want the performance to be over, they feel so in their head, and sometimes they even like black out mentally, like on stage, or blank out, where they get so disoriented because they were so thrown off by a mistake that they can't move forward. I find that this way of thinking, like being so connected and attached to a score and thinking in terms of score, it doesn't tend to help most dancers feel and perform the way they want to. So instead, I invite you to remember that scores are subjective. Remove as much meaning as you can from these scores. Like, don't let them determine how you see yourself as a dancer. You can tell me like, oh, Kirsten, that's easier said than done. I'm sure, like most things are, but at the end of the day, are you going to be committed to supporting yourself in your mindset, or falling into what seems easy now, but it's hard in the long term? It's hard on you to interpret the scores as, oh, this means I'm not good enough, this means I'm not going anywhere, this means blah, blah, blah. That's hard on you over time. So that's not actually easier, my friend. It's much easier now, and in the long term especially, to be diligent and very disciplined with what meaning you make out of things. We can't always, some people feel that they can really control their emotions all the time. Personally, I find that feelings come and they go. I'm a human being, you're a human being. We are resilient. We can feel all sorts of things and be okay. One thing that's been really helpful for me in my life, and also in my practice, I teach this to others, is to separate the feelings that we might be experiencing, which are often understandable, from the meaning we make of a situation. So you can hold two things in tension at the same time, or maybe not even in tension. You can hold these two things of to be true. It is true that I feel disappointment and I feel discouraged about my score, but that doesn't automatically mean it's true that and this story is true that I'm not a good dancer and I'm not going anywhere, you know? So you can acknowledge and feel the feeling without making a conclusion about yourself that becomes a belief that usually gets reinforced over time. All right? Hopefully that made sense. And the last point I will share with you is to ask yourself, what do I want to get out of this competition? So often we focus on what we want to give, what we want to achieve in terms of our performance, what kind of score we get, what kind of placement or awards we get, and that's fair. But when you think, okay, on a bigger picture level, what do I want to get out of my investment of time, energy, and effort into this competition? Big picture, is it growth? Is it like exposure to what's out there? Is it inspiration? Is it the feeling of accomplishment that no matter how it went, like you can really be proud that you put yourself out there and did it? Ask yourself, in a bigger picture sense, what do you want to get out of this competition? Literally, no matter how it goes score-wise. Because what the value of this question is that it reminds you that no matter how it goes, you can get something great out of this experience. You can make it work for you instead of having this very binary way of thinking, like, if I do a bad job, then it's bad and this was a waste. If I don't place, then that's bad, it's a waste. It's not like that. And I find that this perspective of, no, I will get something out of it regardless, it creates a self-fulfilling prophecy where you're looking for the gain, you're looking for how you improved, you're looking for something to celebrate, to learn, a way to expand or grow through the experience. You're looking for ways to make it an opportunity for you. If you think very much in black and white ways, like I described earlier, you're going to just feel so defeated and shut down if it doesn't go exactly your way that you feel like, oh, why did I even bother, to an extent, or some flavor of that thinking. So dancers, I hope you really enjoyed this episode. I do want to just remind you that if you want individualized support in overcoming things like performance anxiety or extreme nervousness, a feeling of a lack of confidence that you feel might affect you going into these competitions, maybe it's self-doubt, comparison to other dancers, caring too much what other people think, perfectionism. These are the kinds of things that I specialize in helping dancers to overcome as a high performance mindset coach. So if you'd like, you are welcome to check out theconfidentdancer.com. It's linked below. I have the Confident Dancer coaching program. It's my individual coaching program where I can really support you very powerfully in overcoming those things and giving you practical and effective mental strategies to build confidence, enjoy dancing, and consistently perform to your fullest potential, because really the mind is so powerful and very few dancers out there are utilizing the power of their mind or getting kind of the support around it. So if you do, not only is it great for you, kind of hate to say this, but it does also give you a competitive advantage. Like, let's just be real if that's something you care about. If not, also like just do it for you too. I recommend that first and foremost, but it is true. So anyway, thank you again for being here. I really appreciate you watching until the end of the video. Let me know if you did, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.